welcome back from the break on Good Morning Sri Lanka. Everything you need to know about photography from one of the best in the industry here in Sri Lanka. Chamil Tantiri Mudalike is here in the studio with us, and we were just speaking before about your photography skills and the stuff you've done. Pretty much you've done weddings, and the list goes on with Chamil. Chamil, let me ask you one question though. For photographers here in Sri Lanka, the young ones, would you ever consider mentoring someone who's just a newbie into the game?
Haven't really thought about it because it's a bit of a logistical thing as well. You have to, put things in place and make things work and all that. Maybe if the right person comes up.
But I also understand you've done a few photography workshops here in Sri Lanka, because I remember during the Vesak season, you had a Facebook update. Hey guys, I'm doing a bit of a run shoot or a walk shoot.
So it's like I'm trying to do like a series of ad hoc kind of photography classes.
Yeah.
So I call it Walkabout Photography Workshop with Chamil. And we start with like a small introduction about photographic theory in general, and then we do a 1.5 hour walk, which is good exercise. And what I try to do there is try to expand the way people take pictures. Like lots of people have, in the digital age especially, people have gotten used to pointing and clicking, see something shiny and just click all the time.
Right.
So I'm trying to, 3 people who come to my class, I'm keeping it very small so that I can talk to them and, show them stuff. And I'm trying to move them away from just point and click photography to more think about the photo and the angles, the composition and all that. And then take the picture.
That's really great advice. I mean,
I think for people who haven't had the chance to be in Chamil's workshops, we have a few tips and professional advice that he can give us right here on Good Morning Sri Lanka. So maybe we should get into the 5 pieces of advice that Chamil Tantra Budalige can give any budding new photographer.
And the first, how would I put it? The first piece of advice by Chamil is, let me see, learn about aperture, shutter speed, and ISO.
Yeah, I would say that's the triangle of things that you need to learn when you're starting out as a photographer. Like you'll need a proper camera that you can change all these settings. So learning all those things will help you move away from what I said before, like a point and click photographer, to a little bit more of a person who plans what they're doing. I think the rest of the tips also come in the same line, which is trying to move from just clicking on the auto settings of the camera and let the camera decide how your picture looks, to move from there to somebody who thinks about their picture and thinks what their background and what the angle and how all these things come together to make
into a more manual way of doing things anyways. But for the people at home that don't really understand what ISO, shutter speed,
and the people right here in the studio.
There we go.
I usually say Google.
Google is a good way.
Or come to one of my workshops.
Alright, speaking about with your tips, we found this pretty amazing clip on YouTube from this YouTube sensation called Shameless Maya, and she pretty much sums up shutter speed, ISO, and aperture in one funny video.
That's quite interesting.
So why don't we check that video out, and be right back with more of great advice by Chamil.
You need to know about photos and videos, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Can be applied to this camera or your point and shoot if it has manual capabilities. So the manual settings on your camera allow for you to customize 3 components combined with lighting. The aperture is the opening in this lens that allows the light to come in. So the aperture is indicated by the letter F. And apertures can start anywhere from 1.2 all the way up to 22. The bigger the opening, the more light can come in. The smaller the opening, the less light can come in. The smaller the opening, the bigger the number. The bigger the opening, the smaller the number. So if you are limited in light, i.e. you are shooting at night or you are shooting in low light situations, you want your aperture to be wide open. If it is super bright outside, so you want the aperture to be smaller, but here are 3 examples with different f-stops, okay? So wide open, which means it's super bright, aperture way closed, super dark. And we're in the middle. This is ideal lighting conditions. So your camera's aperture is also responsible for the depth of field. Depth of field is the distance between the nearest and furthest object in a scene. Now, how is depth of field important to you? You know when you see those images where the person is in focus and the background is completely thrown out of focus? Shallow depth of field. And in order to achieve that, you need to make your aperture wide open. Gotta open it all the way up, which means you need a small f-stop, around 1.2, 1.8, 2, it depends on the situation, but you want to open it right up. And what that will do is put your subject in focus and the background out of focus. For example, I'm going to insert my homegirl, that trick Jackie, so the distance between herself and the grass. And vice versa would happen. If you close the aperture hole right down to an f-stop of say 11 or higher, or even 5. So you'll see in this insert, Jackie and the grass are both in focus. Now moving on, there's shutter speed. How fast or how slow the shutter stays open for the light to hit the sensor that's in this camera. So the shutter speed is measured in terms of seconds, more commonly fractions of seconds, and this is when math is important. We're going to talk about the denominator. So the higher that denominator, the faster the shutter speed. In photo video land, 1 second is uber long. If someone is running, for example, you need to snap them really fast. You need to catch them in the action really fast. So you want a fast shutter speed. Fast is 1/1000th of a second. Slow is 1 second. When would you use a shutter speed of 1 second? Or even slower? You know those sparklers when you want to catch it in slow motion, or even like the car lights, you know that effect? That would require you to slow down the shutter speed. But when you slow it down, that also means more light can hit the sensor, at which point you need to adjust the aperture. So it's all about balancing the aperture and the shutter speed, that you get a combination of numbers that work for that particular environment. Tip is ISO. What you need to know about ISO is you want that number down. You want ISOs in the ballpark of 100, 200, 400. Anything higher starts to create noise, digital noise. So you'll notice when it's dark and you are filming or even taking a photo, there's a lot of grain, a lot of digital noise. That's the ISO. The only time you're going to make that number go high is if you've done everything with the aperture and the shutter speed to try to compensate for more light, but you still are not able to get enough light into the lens. You want to stay away from high ISO settings. Show me what you got. Take off your cap. Don't do that ever.
That was pretty much like a basic tutorial of what like to get to know photography, but I was speaking to you while this video was going on, and you don't agree on a few things that Shameless Maya was saying.
No. I think we should leave it like that.
No, please, just go ahead.
It'd be great to have
the thing is like very highly technical things that she was talking about, which was slightly off, but I think she did like a really good job trying to explain all that in 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. I struggle to do that all the time.
Speaking of, and you mentioned this earlier, that you've learned a lot of your thing about photography on the internet.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing on YouTube, like it's videos like these that really did help you out.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was like a very interesting, small blurb which explained and captured a lot of the important things, which would help anybody
So
who's
what's the
starting
one piece of advice you wish you had known when you started out? Like something a mistake that you would have avoided making if you had known this when you started out?
Nothing that comes to mind as such, because the thing is, when you learn on the job, like photography is a very practical subject, and you need to keep taking pictures to learn it. So I used to take a lot of pictures, so now I have limited myself to not shoot so many pictures, but it's something that you learn through your process. So I wouldn't say that it's something that would have been better if I known earlier, because it wouldn't be in my mind, and I wouldn't understand why I should take less pictures. So through making the mistakes, you learn, and you learn it well, rather than somebody saying don't take so many pictures, or something else. So I would say photography is one of those fields you have to learn by mistake, and you'll understand. When people come to me about advice about lenses and cameras and all that, I would say, buy a basic lens, buy a basic camera, see what it can do, and try to figure out what it can't do for you, and then figure out if you want to spend a lot more money on something else.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess we can move on to the next piece of advice that you can give young photographers. So learn about basic composition techniques and how you can use your camera in the manual mode, and I usually use the auto mode, because then everything is just focused instantly and I just point and click, as you said. But how can you figure out the composition of your photograph, and whether you should have a lot of elements in it or very few?
See, again, it depends a lot on what you're shooting. Like typically if you're shooting a person, and then you should look at the background. If the background also says something about the person, you'll probably want the background in the composition. And also, when I talk composition, there are certain rules as to how to compose a shot. Like basic, not rules per se, they're like guidelines which are part of nature. Like sometimes you don't realize it, but it's there, and you should learn a bit about them. And I always say you have to know the rule to break it first. You learn about the rule, you understand it, you work with it, and then you break it, and you know why you broke it, rather than just blindly taking pictures.
Right. Going into your next piece of advice, which is don't just click. Plan how you want the picture to look like and then take it. Which makes complete sense if you ask me.
Because as I said, sometimes you want the background, and then all these aperture and stuff comes into effect. So you think, okay, do I want the background blurred off, or do I want it in focus? Do I want all of that, or do you want to zoom in? And if somebody's moving, do you want to, freeze that movement, or get a lot of you can shoot with a slight motion blur and stuff. So there are different ways you can shoot something. And if you have seen all these race car shots, you see the race car in very clear, and then you see some of the background a little blurred off, so stuff like that. So you think about what you're taking and how you want it taken, and then slowly take the shot. And sometimes it doesn't work all the time, because sometimes by the time you figure it all out, the person has moved from where you want them to be. But in general,
think before you click.
Yeah,
it's a good piece of advice.